Today, we talk about what we exactly came here to talk about. The the live on TikTok tells a wrong number. The live reads as being Mindful Live 31, but actually it's Mindful Live 32. Welcome to Mindful Live 32. It is the 4th of February 2022. Today is what? Friday. Yes, it's Friday. Good night, Joel Chow. Welcome to Mindful Live number 32. We are moving well along. An entire month worth of lives have passed. Be sure to hit that like button once you're inside, whether you're on YouTube, Instagram, or over on TikTok. Be sure to hit that like button. Share the live if you feel so obliged. Share it to someone. Tell someone, hey, I think you'd like this live. Look for all of these smart people you know and tell them, hey, if you're really smart, this might be a life you'd be into. That's a bit underhanded, but it might work. All right, so what we're talking about today is the whistleblower legislation. Whistleblower legislation that is right now being, not right now, but is presently, as in present continuous, being debated in our parliament. The government has moved this. The Prime Minister himself has raised this motion, moved this bill that they want to pass the whistleblower legislation. The idea is that what you want, the Prime Minister introduced this bill by speaking about how corrupt our country is. And Trinidad is very corrupt. We fell several points on the corruption index. We are perceived as being corrupt, and we are actually corrupt. Now, those two things aren't good night, Shiny Douglas. Those two things aren't necessarily always linked. You could be perceived as corrupt without necessarily being corrupt, but you could be both. And I think Trinidad is both. Not only are we corrupt, because we are corrupt as... When I say we, understand the context, because I personally don't consider myself corrupt, but the general movement of the Trinidad society allows for a high level of corruption, and the perception in Trinidad society is also of a high level of corruption. Nearly everyone in Trinidad perceives our institutions as being corrupt. So not only are they corrupt in truth and in fact, but they are perceived as such too. And when it's perceived as such, what that does to the general country is it decreases investment. By and large, that's one of the things it does, because, well, it decreases a certain kind of investment. It might actually encourage a certain other kind of investment. Some of that more black market investment may be encouraged and enthused by seeing the level of corruption in our society. But if you're looking for a society to invest your real honest dollars in, if you just so happen to fall upon, good night, Auntie Do, if you just so happen to fall upon some wealth and you think, you know what, I want to invest. And next thing you're from another country and you're looking at Trinidad and, that's an interesting island. I heard it's not even a real place. Let's see how investments in unreal places go. And you go down and you come down to Trinidad and you think, here's somewhere I want to invest. But then you notice that the company you want to invest in, they have to pay a bribe to get their electrical connected. They have to pay something extra to get through in the customs and excise division. And you recognize that, wait, all the fees you see written on paper and in the law books in this country aren't actually all of the fees you have to pay. Was that an article or a social media post I read? Someone was lamenting a Trinidadian that went away and lived for a considerable period of time. Their spouse passed and they tried to come back down to Trinidad, and they knew they had money inside of the bank and all of that, so they thought they were of no worry to get things done here. When they came here, they had another thing coming. And that's the difficulty when you are perceived as a corrupt country. People will not want to put investment into your country because you are perceived as corrupt. I hear that libraries put the Trinidad history in the fictional section because it's not a real place. Ha! Okay, so Rowley says, people wanted to kill me for exposing corruption. And that's the level that Dr. Rowley was willing to go to expose corruption in our country. This is how he started introducing his bill. The Prime Minister said he had to be driven around in a bulletproof vehicle when he was opposition leader because he was targeted by certain elements for his determination to expose corruption at all levels in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this is something I was speaking about when I was speaking about how we deal with arms and ammunition and how we deal with other people and their access to such. So the Prime Minister is saying that when he made a revelation about, when he was attempting to make revelations about the corruption taking place in our country, people wanted to kill him and he had to be driven around in bulletproof vehicles. Now, I understand the point he is making, but I think there's actually a tangential point that can be made there, something that can be seen further down the line as we speak and we notice that this legislation, the whistleblower legislation, provides protection for your job. They cannot fire you. They cannot persecute you in your workplace. But it doesn't actually provide a way to protect your life. The legislation doesn't allow you the privilege, like our Prime Minister had, of being able to be driven around in bulletproof vehicles. The legislation seems to have forgotten that little tidbit. You do not get that privilege in the legislation. You get protected from not being fired. That's great. They cannot just fire you, etc. But yeah, you have to fight it out on your own. The Prime Minister said, yes, Dr. Rowley said this when he opened debate on Whistleblower Protection Bill 2022 in the House of Representatives on Friday. What do you think about the schools reopening? Sir, you cannot come in one you cannot come in one and ask and say the live is boring and then attempt to ask a question. It doesn't work that way. Where were you taught? Where did you learn communication? Was there no communication studies where you went to school? There must be some communication studies there. All right. He said anyone familiar with TT's past and present will have no trouble with understanding there's an overwhelming level of corruption, describing this as an unfortunate fact of life. Rowley said the corruption was not limited to politicians, but found at every level of society. And that is true. That is very much true. He said, as someone who committed himself to exposing and eliminating corruption wherever it was found, people threatened to kill him. I ran through the 2015 general election as opposition leader with a threat to my life because it appeared as though PNM could have won that election and I could have become the Prime Minister. So people were threatening to kill the opposition leader because he was exposing corruption. And he said he went through the elections in 2015 and people were really worried about what he would do about the corruption happening in society. So they were threatening his life. Now, here's my question. What did he do? This isn't a knock at Dr. Rowley. I'm not saying this isn't even about his general rule and general leadership, but really about corruption. When we're talking about corruption in our society, that he says he willingly admits, and he started this whole politics business, I believe, since 1987, somewhere around there. So he is experienced in this. He's an OG in Trinidad politics. He has been in politics for more than half of the existence of Trinidad as an independent country. So yes, what has he done since he has been Prime Minister? What steps have been taken? Has anyone? I've heard him allege many of his political rivals are very corrupt. I've heard those allegations over and over and over again. Have any of those political rivals ended up in prison? Have any of them paid back some of the money that they have allegedly stolen? But would that be deflecting from the real issue of political corruption? I don't know. He said government will not protect anyone accused of, he said his government will not protect anyone accused of corruption and rejects the views of the Leave It Just So people who want corruption to continue. Government MPs thumped their desks as Rowley declared, "I am saying no. Corruption must not continue." Now, I like the theatrics. I like the theatrics. I appreciate it. Yes, you are there and you have to swing the crowd too. As a politician, you're speaking to a crowd. You have to be able to speak to the crowd and relate to them. And have some emotion in how you speak. So grand for the theatrics. But how exactly will this bill stop corruption? Why not introduce legislation for now that deals with mismanagement? Christmas Day, I saw Mr. Livesport in a bar in Tobago. I was tempted to ask for a little 100K. And Mr. Livesport might have attacked you. But if when you speak about Mr. Livesport, I'm thinking of the same government minister. Is that the minister who said he is familiar with the alcohol, but when it came to the grades, he wasn't too good with that. Just 2 of those and he's out for the count. If it's that minister, that whole allegation went way deeper than that, Some people I find have short memories. The allegation around that whole life sport business went way deeper than just a couple million being stolen. There were alleged murders. There were alleged plans to be murdered. There was alleged impropriety within the bounds of marriage that was allegedly recorded, and people were allegedly placed on lists to be killed because of those alleged conducts. So, yeah, it went way deeper than that. So, in such a case, for example, like such a case, what would the whistleblower legislation do exactly to help stop this? I cannot really see how exactly the whistleblower legislation is going to help stop this. He pointed out while he was introducing the legislation, as many of those politicians do. Second time being here, welcome Darshan 6. He pointed out, as many of those politicians do, he pointed out many instances of corruption that he has witnessed personally, or that he has seen going on around him. He has seen money stolen. Here, there was some document that he signed saying only so much money was supposed to be sent out, and then when he flew out of the country, he found out that actually someone changed the number on that document, etc., etc., etc. And I usually am very enthusiastic. I like hearing all of this information. I like information, but it sometimes feels so torturous for us to be given information over and over and over. They keep telling us, "Hey, that guy, he stole from you, He stole." It's like, someone standing with you in a corner and, hey, you see that fella passing right there? Yeah, that is one of them who steal your money, And you're like, okay, all right. Yeah, and the next one, he steal your shoes. And the next one, you see the phone you was missing? He was the one who stole your phone. And then nothing else. Why are you just pointing out all the people who are stealing our money, but nothing is being done about it? What's the point of pointing it out if you are not going to do anything about it? And in this case, with the whistleblower legislation, as I said, what exactly can be done? Because the general idea of the whistleblower legislation is it's protecting people. Hey, Skitsu, what's up? It's protecting people who see something and want to see something. They can now go to the whistleblower people, and this is the awkward part of this for me. The awkward part of this for me is it wasn't created around around the general structure we already have in law enforcement and in the legal departments in our country. No, they're going to create some new section for whistleblowing, the whistleblowing department unit. And every company in that stipulated category is going to have an internal whistleblower unit. So someone, I guess, working in the company would have to be reassigned to be this whistleblower compliance officer or whatever you would call them, and that person would have to take this whistleblower information, and if it is deemed as being viable information, they would have to update the whistleblower every now and again. They would have to update them on where this investigation is, and they would have to send it through the right channels. Now, the creepy thing about all of this is you have to write it down. This whistleblower legislation tells you you are not going to drop off something anonymously. No, that's not how this is going to work. You are going to put down your name. They know who you are. And you are officially going to say, hey, this is Nathan Springer, and I see this very wealthy and powerful person breaking the law, and I see them doing something that could potentially put them in jail and could potentially lose them millions of dollars. Yes, me, small fry Nathan Springer, saw very wealthy, powerful person doing something that could put them behind bars. Signed, Nathan Springer. Idiot. Because that's what you're taking some people for there. You must be taking people for idiot. Because when people, I think, for me, if I'm thinking about this, I think, generally speaking, most people, I sing it, Big Me and Freed, I think most people who are afraid, we're not talking about those who are already unafraid, like Roni, who big and bashy out there. Congrats to you, Roni. You brave out there. But the people who are already afraid, what they are afraid of, I don't think it's primarily losing their jobs. I really don't think so. When people are afraid of what may happen if they say... Why? When people are afraid of what may happen if they say something, I don't think what they are afraid of is being fired. They are afraid of catching some fire, if you understand what I mean. That's much more of a threat, I think. The opposition, though, isn't having it with this legislation. However, I find a lot of the way the opposition is opposing this legislation seems weird to me. The arguments the opposition has, have you researched whistleblower legislation from other regions? Briefly, not very in depth. And to be frank, it would help me get a more holistic picture if I see some other whistleblower legislation from other districts. But I'm not looking at it watching what other people are doing. I'm looking at it trying to just use sense a bit. And all right, the opposition says no to whistleblower legislation, and I find some of their reasoning to be a bit lacking. Opposition leader Kamala Prasad-Bissessar is of the view that the Whistleblower Protection Bill is a legal nightmare for citizens. Speaking during debate on the bill in the House of Representatives on Friday, Prasad-Bissessar said the law will be deemed unconstitutional in the courts, calling the bill in its current form a replica of the 2018 bill the opposition didn't support. She said there were several amendments that ought to be made. Yes, that is true. Yes, that is true. Just by the way, not this same bill, but some version of this bill was brought up in front of the parliament back in 2018 and also back in 2015, and the opposition didn't support it then. Didn't support it then in 2015. They didn't support it then in 2018. So unless some significant changes are made now, I don't see them supporting it now anyway. And that's kind of what they're saying just about anyhow. She raised concerns with Clause 19, which she said tramples on citizens' rights. Prasad-Bissessar said this clause grants immunity to a person who has made a protected disclosure from any criminal, civil, or disciplinary proceedings. She said this was unconstitutional, as there's the possibility that someone can make a false declaration and the person being accused can't take action. So there's a clause in this legislation that basically says, listen, if you make a whistleblower declaration, did they call it a declaration? Was that how they phrased it? Disclosure. If you made a whistleblower disclosure, but you understand that it must be considered as a protected disclosure. If you make one of those disclosures that is considered as such, then you are protected from all criminal and civil liability from that. No one can sue you, no one can prosecute you over those matters. And that says a lot. And what that says, what the opposition leader is saying there, is that if perchance you lied on your disclosure, your whistleblower disclosure wasn't actually truth, it was some mixing in there of salacious lies, then the person who you lied on, who would actually be a victim in this case, would have no recourse. They cannot sue you for libel. They cannot sue you for defamation because you are protected from all civil or criminal proceedings. Good night, interesting. They does never have any basis for opposing. They are too afraid to act on it either way. A certain young minister stepdaughter still not behind. Hey, what you're having me reading out loud here? What you having me reading out loud here? Yes, as I go on with what the opposition leader was saying. However, though, the opposition leader also raised concerns that sufficient protections were not in place for the person in receipt of the information. What she was talking about there was the whistleblower officer, the whistleblowing officer inside of these companies. So how it's supposed to work, I guess, is that the whistleblower writes up their report, signs their name, identifies themselves, sends it into the whistleblowing officer inside the internal whistleblowing unit inside of this company. And there's someone inside there who would be hired for that job. Now, what the opposition leader was pointing out, and to me, this is actually a viable point. If it actually functions how it's intended to, that person would actually be in a very powerful position and a very dangerous position. You are out here holding all the dirty secrets of this company. So you are in the prime position to get the Pablo Escobar special. Plata o plomo. Silver or lead. Because you would have all of this information that could potentially take down a lot of powerful people. So they wouldn't want to be taken down. They may be willing to supply you with some paisa to make sure that you go along with their plans. Or they may be, according to how dangerous it may be, if you're talking about risking some powerful person ending up in jail and you have that information, then you as this whistleblowing officer is in danger. You are in danger. And that's what the opposition leader was pointing out. And I don't think she was wrong in this case. I think whoever this whistleblowing officer would have to be someone who has some kind of legal protection somehow. Because that would be a very sensitive position to be placed in. However, Finance Minister Colm Imbert, in his rebuttal, noted that Clause 8 makes ample provision for these securities. Under the legislation, a disclosure isn't protected if the whistleblower knowingly or should have reasonably known that the information was false. So, the whistleblower legislation, they actually have a bit of a summary on it here, where you could go and look on the Parliament website and see a bit of the summary. And in the Clause 8, they have several stipulations where your disclosure has to qualify to be considered as a whistleblowing disclosure. You are not just going to bring up random bacchanal and say, hey, I hear George Horn Patsy, and you're going to tell that to the whistleblowing unit. No, that's not how it works. There are certain qualifications. Good night, J. Chris. There are certain qualifications for your statement to actually get in there. The bill was first introduced in the House by National Security Minister on January 14th. However, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley moved the motion for debate in legislation more recently today. And it wasn't just the opposition leader that had some things to say about it. One of the opposition, I think he's the opposition chief whip, I'm not sure, I believe he is, Dr. Munilal, he had some comments to say on it. And he brought up, the first part he brought up was that he said this is institutionalizing, it is the institutionalization of macroing. That's how he phrased it. that what this whistleblower legislation was actually going to do is it is going to institutionalize macoing. And he is afraid that the Trinidad public is just generally too macocious to, to have a bill like this. But again, there are some protections. It's not random maco and bad talk that is going to be placed in the whistleblowing unit. The other point he was making, however, was part of the point that I made too. He was saying that most whistleblowers are not interested in their name getting out there. It is unlikely that a whistleblower wants their name out there. Usually, if you see a whistleblower and they are very interested in getting public acclaim, they want their name out there for publicity, then you generally watch the content of their whistleblowing with a squinted eye, because this person may have been doing this more for their own personal gain. And by the way, within the whistleblowing legislation, if you do it for personal gain, it's not protected. So if it's not protected, then you do not have that legal protection. And then if you do lie on someone, good luck in the court system. But yes, he was saying that the general culture, quoted from him, the culture here is people will find their politician, their priest, the leader in society, the principal in the school, and so on, and say, boss, look, I have this information. You look best like you could do something with it, and you go and see what could happen, see if it's true, and just leave me out. And some people were dragging him for this, but I actually understand the point that he was making there. The general attitude in a lot of Trinidad society is that many people, especially in the lower ranks in their jobs, would actually take that position. They would look for a priest, a pastor, someone they know. They would look for their politician and send it off to a trusted politician and say, hey, I find this thing out. You deal with that. Leave me out. Because they know, as the small fry, the Trini saying goes, cockroach have no place in fowl party. If you're a cockroach and you jump in the fowl dance, while the fowl and them dancing and getting on, they could trample you, and then they could have you as a cutters later on in the night. If it's anonymous, people would sing like birds. Yes, that is the fact of the matter. The only way I think to really get the best out of whistleblowing is to have some anonymity in it. But there's a problem with anonymity too, because anonymity decreases the responsibility that the person who says the thing has on what they say. If you look on social media, nearly any social media where people can be anonymous, they are almost always more rude. Look at some of the random people who would want to jump in on TikTok, jump in the random lives and say, hey, your life boring, or try and just stir up some trolling in the chat. Nearly all the time, the trolls are anonymous. Because first up, they are cowards. And secondly, it decreases, you don't have a link you don't have to link with what you're saying. That anonymity on social media, it makes the cost of being a jerk. I heard this statement recently. It brought the cost of being a jerk down to zero. Reality is, if you're walking in reality, in the real world, the cost of being a jerk could be a punch to face, a cuff to face. It's according to where you are. If you just jump up and tell somebody something just out of the way. And the reality is most people know that. That's why people don't act like that in reality. People don't see random strangers in reality and just insult them. Hey, you clown. Hey, you don't walk up to two people having a conversation and jump in and butt in and be rude. But when you're anonymous online, there's no cost. There's no cost to that. You don't have to hold on to the cost of your rudeness. So that's part of the problem with anonymity. And having anonymous whistleblowers would have that kind of thing where it would be easier to just kind of stir up the confusion and trouble without necessarily the reports being verified. It's just anonymous people. You're anonymous. You could say whatever you want. On my self-employed slavery, just passing to show support. Keep up the good work, bro. Thanks, Hex Senpai. All right. but it's going to be investigated anyway. That's true, but some people may think and may see it as you're wasting some of the investigators' time. If it's going to be investigated, yeah, but you're just taking all of the random accusations. How many investigators do you have? You could get 500 no, you could get 500 disclosures per day, especially if it's anonymous. They're going to, as you said, they're going to sing like birds. We're going to have the birds singing, Roni. You should know well about that. Those birds out there. And they are going to be lots of birds whistling many tunes, and it's going to take a lot of manpower to chase down all of the varieties of different birds singing different tunes. And almost surely some of those birds will be faking it. Some of them would be faking it. That's almost surely true. All right, some interesting news out of Barbados. Trinidad is a joke. They can't deal with crime. What make you believe they're going to deal with corruption? That's part of the truth. If people don't trust giving information to the police to talk, if people don't trust selling out their random neighbor who is selling, who might just be selling some small drugs, and he can't do them anything, and people are already like, you know what, let me mind my business. What do you think people are going to do when you're talking about people in high places, as bosses of companies, as heads of state boards, etc., etc.? What do you really think people are going to do? Knowingly do that? No, it's unlikely. But yes, some interesting news out of Barbados. And Barbados is a country seeming to be running on some heavy woman power. So for those in the chat who like that idea of woman power, crime and corruption linked very closely. That's a very good point. That is a very good point. I forgot the precise nature of the quote, but there's a quote that basically insinuates that if a country has a high crime rate, it almost surely can be traced to a corrupt political class. Because I've said this before, because a corrupt political class needs an inept law enforcement group. If you have effective law enforcement, then you cannot have corrupt politicians. They just kind of don't go together. It's those two are literally a zero-sum game. The more effective a police service you have, the less corrupt officials you can have, because the effective police service would investigate and arrest those corrupt politicians. Because remember, no one is supposed to be above the law. All those politicians, all those public officials are supposed to be able, and I know in Trinidad we are not accustomed seeing those things, but it's supposed to be that those regular police, in those regular gray uniforms walking about the road, yes, those regular police could investigate those big boys. Yes, they can. Yes, that's how the law is supposed to function. They're supposed to be able to investigate them and put them in prison. So if you have an effective, honest law enforcement agency, then it's impossible really to have a corrupt political class. And then on the other hand, if you have an honest political class that oversees the law enforcement agencies, then with an honest political class, it's very difficult to have a dishonest law enforcement agency. To have dishonest law enforcement agencies, because they would be overseen by people who wouldn't stand for corruption. That's just reality. So they feed into each other. If one is corrupt and inept, it's almost surely that the other is corrupt and inept too. It's just reality. It's just reality. There's nearly no way one can be good and the other bad. And if you're seeing crime in a society, now, crime has a variety of reasons. Crime does have a variety of reasons. There is the social and cultural breakdown, etc., breakdown of family, all of that, yes. But at the end of the day, a large part of crime basically has to do with the ability of law enforcement agencies to stop it from happening. If they could have stopped the guns, then you wouldn't have that many shootings. And I believe a large part of the criminal enterprise in Trinidad, what makes them so willing to be so out in the open with whatever they're doing, is because you don't regularly get caught. Two men can be murdered in the middle of a mall, and the murderers aren't very worried about getting caught. It seems to me, generally, when you look at crime in Trinidad and the to and fro, especially in the gang warfare scene, It seems to me like you'll more likely be caught by an opposing gang member than by a police. If if someone commits a crime, if someone murders someone, and you want to know who is this murderer, you might more likely find out that information from some other gang member than the police, because apparently the police don't know. But the gang members sure seem to find out, because there's always a reprisal killing for it. Strange, eh? The amalgamated security truck that got robbed on the highway and then 4 years later was used to rob. Wow. You remembering some stuff? I remember some stuff from back then too. That amalgamated truck was stopped, I believe, by a van carrying with a tray load of cement bags to increase the weight, and that was the technique they used to do that heist. But a very similar technique with a weighted van was used to knock a certain high-profile prosecutor off the road when that certain high-profile prosecutor was leaving a certain casino, going right there to their home, and that same kind of weighted van technique was used. Suspicious coincidences. I remember that. That's what I remember. And bear in mind, that was linked to that amalgamated business, which was linked to the certain official that Roni was speaking about earlier in the chat that she saw somewhere in a bar in Tobago. All of those were linked. And then there were investigations from that specific prosecutor to government officials. Dr. Rowley himself said during that time, during that bit of bacchanal, he had to drive around in bulletproof vehicles to keep himself protected from it. I do not have bulletproof vehicle money, so hey, when the whistleblower legislation comes on, then I could talk about all those things, because you know what, that legislation, by creating a whistleblowing unit, is going to protect people from reprisal. Yeah, that's going to work, sure. All right, so yes, just for kicks. So Barbados, we're moving on from there. Barbados right now, for those who like the idea of woman power, Barbados is kind of a testament to some of that. Their prime minister, their president, their top star, Rihanna is could as well be a political official over there. The person who was running against the prime minister to oppose her in the recent election was also another woman. So woman power over in Barbados, and Barbados is going to change their school system, and I kind of like it. I kind of like that they have the cojones to go through the process of at least checking to see what else is out there. What else can be done about the school system, because it's obvious something better could be done. Academic shift. Education Act to be replaced. President announces major changes to education. Barbados' education system is in for a major shakeup. Marking the first sitting of Parliament as a Republic state, President of Barbados, Her Excellency the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason. Wow, what a name. That does have a kind of resplendent feel to it. I have to say that over. Her Excellency the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason announced plans to replace the Education Act of 1983. I've said this in a previous live. I kind of believe in sunset clauses for many laws. Hear me out, the pandemic was the perfect opportunity to restructure. I agree. The pandemic gave that opportunity. I kind of believe in sunset clauses for laws. Like, realistically, when you're talking about the fine points of something, when you're going into the fine print points of something, do we realistically expect something drafted in 1983 to be really effective now? Like, I could understand having an old constitution, as in the general rights and responsibilities and freedoms that the people in this country are afforded. Grand. We have that old constitution that stands there. But when it comes to laws and bills and acts that are passed in parliament by politicians that go and come on a 5-year basis, these politicians are going and coming on a 5-year basis. And you're telling me they're going to make a law that would stand through time in perpetuity? That really doesn't make sense to me. Personally, I think every law should have some kind of sunset clause. And here's the thing, that doesn't mean that all the laws are just going to disappear. You are free to re-up the law. If you think this law from 1983 is really effective for modern times, then great, you could take it and all right, we'll read over this and we'll have to repass it in parliament so that at least now the modern people, because back in 1983, when this law was passed, the people who voted for the members of parliament, for the legislators who passed that bill, those people may be long gone. The people who are voting for the legislators to pass a bill are present in present time. I want my legislators to decide the country I live in, not the legislators that are long gone. Let's make sure that the legislation is up to date. Trinidad laws are very outdated. The reality is, in many places, I think the vast majority of the world, their laws are outdated. And here's the strange thing. Those parliamentarians, their main job isn't to go and run state companies, isn't to go on retreats, isn't to go and kiss babies, isn't to open buildings. That's not their main job. As a parliamentarian, your main job is lawmaking. That's all your main job is. Go make the laws. So I have no problem giving them more work. Yes, the law is going to expire. Yes, that one is going to expire. Reread it and make sure it's up to date. Yes, we're paying you to work. Go work. Yes, please. Thanks. You wouldn't believe the kinds of laws on our books. Yes, I may believe some of them. I had an old book that someone gave me that was a list of some old funny laws from all over the world. There are some ridiculous ones where you can't put a pie on a windowsill. It's illegal to put a pie on a windowsill. It's illegal to whistle on a Sunday, and some really, really strange stuff. Laws are always created and added to put citizens in check, but there's none created to keep those who create the laws in check. Rhea, that kind of language you're speaking there, you sound like the United States founding fathers. That's kind of their tone of language. The American Constitution is one of the few law books in the world that kind of points not at the population and what the population can and can't do. It actually turns around and points at the government and says what the government can and can't do. So it's a limitation on the government, not a limitation on the population. And the way they have it is that anything that the law doesn't expressly give the government the authority to do is up to the state to legislate those things. So basically the government goes down to the smaller level. And I like that idea. But even over there, that's more in writing more than anything. Their federal government is growing in power by the day nearly. So it's not even what they wanted it to be. And that's just the difficulty of it. We're hoping with these things, what you're hoping is that you put someone there that is going to write the law. But when they're writing the law, you're hoping that they don't create laws that would give them outsized power. And that's a big hope. That is a massive hope. It's like Monopoly. It's like we're all playing a countrywide Monopoly. And we have to give some people the power to be the banker. And if you ever played Monopoly among family members and you had that little mischievous cousin who has moral flexibility when it comes to Monopoly, they will thief out all those $500 bills and the whole game goes upside down and people get very angry. And that's kind of human nature. You're giving humans the power over other humans, and then you're telling those humans with the power over other humans, you know what? You make the rules about how far you could go. You could only go that far. You tell us how far you could go, okay? That doesn't really make sense. It really doesn't. Those in power will always attempt to take more power. In my opinion, the system right now is in line with that of slavery. Good night, Skinner Park. I wouldn't go that far. I think that's a bit of hyperbole. And it's a bit, to me, it's a bit of downplaying what slavery actually was. It's not exactly slavery that we're living in. But what is, I think what is being attempted to be developed is a new model of what is serfdom. Serfdom is what existed for a large part in Europe during the Middle Ages, where the vast majority of people owned nothing. So you don't own anything. The feudal lords own most of everything. And you basically pay them to live on what you live on. And you pay them the taxes for it. And they make sure that you don't die to some extent. And I think that's kind of the direction. And I think that's kind of the direction that the world seems to be heading back in to some extent. More of that serfdom, where many of those who are wealthy are pulling the free market ladders up. They don't want anyone to be able to climb up those ladders anymore. You stay down there. We would own everything. And don't worry, we'd make sure that you are a good consumer. We'd make sure you're a happy consumer to consume your entire life. Yeah, fun. Education, this is going back to the Barbados. Education will be more focused on problem solving, critical thinking, and lifelong learning, the president said. President Dame Sandra Mason also declared the Barbados Secondary School Entrance Examination, BSSEE. I think SE was a better acronym than that. No wonder you had to throw that away, Barbados. BSSEE. How do you say that? Basi? The Basi? Hey, you're writing Basi this year? How do you even say that? No. We have better acronyms over it. That's a fact. If it's one thing Trinidad is really good at, is making up acronyms. Must, YTEP, SEA, C. Boy, we're good at those acronyms, Commonly known as the 11 plus, will be abolished and replaced with a middle schools system. Barbados is going through to middle school, and I don't think I dislike that idea. Now, I am kind of on the fence when it comes to testing. And testing is needed. You need tests in life. You need tests. Tests help to not only tell the teacher what's happening, tests help to tell you yourself where you are strong, where you are weak, what you actually know, what you don't actually know. But I think kind of the style of teaching, it's similar to the political system, where a lot of what has been created in the political system, I don't think it might be American standard. I didn't read the specification of how they are going to do it. I would hope that they would be creating their own unique kind of middle school. Don't necessarily follow the American system, because if you go into the history of some of those official public school systems, you'd notice that many of them were developed and envisioned by straight up evil people who didn't really have the children's best interests at heart. So I hope they develop their own unique system. But as I was saying, I think the way how we have maneuvered ourselves around the testing ecosystem that we live in is that we have started to teach for the tests instead of teaching for knowledge, and the tests just test the knowledge that you have acquired. We don't do that anymore. We teach for the tests. So it's like we've lost sight of the actual goal now. We missed that mark. And it's one of those unintended consequences. Nearly everything has those unintended consequences. You wanted to know that, yes, we want to make sure that this person has the knowledge required for them after they leave this class. We want to make sure that. So we're going to develop a series of, and it makes sense. It makes sense. I'm going to ask you a series of questions to make sure that what you said you learned in that class actually stuck in your mind. So yes, let's develop a series of questions for this. But then eventually, after years and years of asking those series of questions, people start to recognize, well, actually what tells me how good I am in this isn't really how much knowledge I have, it's how good I could answer those series of questions. So if I could find out what exactly is the series of questions that are going to come, then I could just learn all the answers for them and I'm fine. And that's the system we have kind of built. The syllabus is an answer to the test questions. No extra, well, not no extra knowledge, but little extra knowledge. We have a problem with secondary school as teachers only need to have a degree to get an appointment. Problem-solving skills, teaching should have been a standard in schools. I agree. I fully agree with that. Problem-solving should have always been high up in there. Government also plans to form schools of excellence in arts, sciences, commerce, information and communications technology, ICT, technical skills and other skill sets needed for national development. Well, Barbados is heading in a direction there. Briefly touching on government's plans to continually upskill and train citizens, the president disclosed plans are afoot to train artisans and construction workers for the incoming building boom. I feel the Barbados president and prime minister was sitting in on the Mindful Live from one of the nights this week, because this was the topic that we spoke about. This very same thing was one of the topics we spoke about this week, where we're seeing that right now in the system there is a lack in these very same skill sets, and the school system that we presently have, the incentives that the school system we presently have pushes away from those artisan skills and those trade skills. And the thing is, in a society, generally speaking, in a society, you would use, let's put it this way, an everyday person, a regular person, would more essentially use a plumber than they would use a programmer. That's just fact. That's just fact. You would build your toilet in your house before you get all the apps installed on your computer. We need more trade school. Not everyone is textbook oriented. We spoke about that at length in a live, and it seems like you know what? I'm going with that. I'm going with one of the numbers inside of the live was actually the president or the prime minister of Barbados, and they were just chilling in my life. They were just chilling in the Mindful Life, taking in all that we see. So you all be on your best behavior. They are important people in these lives because they are listening clearly to what we are saying. There will be continuous effort to train teachers and civil servants to upskill the national population, to train artisans and a new core of male and female construction workers to fill the jobs in the coming building boom. I respect it. I respected Barbados. Props up to Barbados for doing the things. The junior sec and senior sec system had its merits. I agree. If we're just talking in terms of comparison, comparatively, I think I may have preferred that junior senior sec system than what they changed it around to. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, but that's me. I think obviously the junior and senior sec system needed tweaking, and needed tweaking for modern times, like all of the schools and all of the schooling systems. It needed some of that tweaking to more accurately line up with modern times and how schooling and education is done in modern times, and to get away from some of the stigma that there obviously was. But the reasoning that I saw, one of the main reasons that they said we had to get away from the junior and senior sex system was there was so much stigma with the junior and senior sex. People looked down on people who passed for those schools. But here's the thing. By changing the name of the school, you didn't change that reality. Everyone in Trinidad still knows which school was the junior sec, which school was the senior sec. They still aren't very happy and enthusiastic when they pass for them. That hasn't actually changed the stigma. It didn't decrease the prestige of the prestige schools. They are still considered prestige schools, and people still prefer their children to go to those schools. So what did it really change? That was just a change in name. Those change in names, we see them all around the place. Like, you do a superficial change change, and we expect. So we stop calling Negroes Negroes. That is now offensive. You call them black, and especially in the US, they were ahead in this nonsense. You had to call them black. Negroes was then, but there was a point in time Negroes was fine. Then that was bad. Now it's black, but then black became bad. So then you had to go with colored folk, but then colored folk is bad. So you had to go with, not, you can't say a colored person, you had to say a person of color now. But now just POC leaves out some, so you have to add in BIPOC. So now it's a BIPOC person. There's no end to it. The name doesn't change the stigma. The reality is what the stigma is. If you want to change that, you'd have to do something about the actual reality that exists there. But I think that kind of separation, that 3 years to catch yourself, I think that was actually better even for the psychology of the students there. So, okay, you may have passed for a junior sec. You had 3 years to see what exactly you wanted to do there. And maybe that already filtered you into a certain group where maybe you wanted to end at the end of junior sec. And here's the thing. That should not be frowned upon. Let's imagine that someone gets enough knowledge at the end of 14, 15, 16. They're looking to go out there into the job market, into some kind of apprenticeship program. Now, let's look at the person in a prestige school. They still have to go through Form 4, Form 5, Lower 6, Upper 6, first year, second year, third year, maybe even fourth year of their bachelors. If they're really overperform out there, they might go into another 2 years for their masters. And by that time, they might be 25, 24, somewhere up there. And by that time, that person who left to enter the job market at apprenticeship level back then at 14, 15, 16, they would have had nearly a decade of work experience. So you would be joining the job market with your masters, and you might be joining for your little $12,000 salary, and you're feeling good about yourself. But the other guy who has been in the job market for 10 years under apprenticeship programs, doing some things that actually bring there must be something that could record the knowledge that the person has acquired, obviously, to show that they are knowledgeable in it. That person would have 10 years experience on you. Their salary may already be higher than yours. You're going out there as a fresh new face trying to get a job with no work experience and your master degree, while they already had their car. They had a car since they were 17 years, already bought it on their own. In fact, they bought a second one and put that one on the road to work, and now they're driving this one, and they're already married at 24, 25 because they could have afforded that by then, while you're struggling there with your master's degree. And what that does is, even for the psychology of those, it doesn't make that disparity there. Yes, you feel good about accomplishing what you did with your master's degree, and that's good on you, good for your education. But at the same time, this person can feel good about accomplishing what they did in the job sphere, and you didn't force them to go through another 4 or 5 years of education that they evidently were not paying any attention to since they were 14. I watched a documentary where people in the US are angry they took away the vocational aspect from high school. Yes, I saw I don't know if it was the same documentary like that, but I saw some people angry about that. Wasn't that the point of the NCSE exam at the end of Form 3? To be quite honest with you, I don't even know what the point of the NCSE exam was. Kind of depressing for all the degree holding folks out here. I don't mind. Because I would like, you see, just how people would like, and the government, at least what they said, they would have liked for the stigma of the junior sec to leave. I would like for that automatic ego pride boost of the university educated to leave also. Listen, just because you went there doesn't automatically make you smarter than everyone else who didn't. And maybe if we had a system that practically used the skills of people who didn't go through the university stream, then we'd have a system that allows people to see that it was never a matter of who is smarter. It's just a matter of using your skills in different avenues. But then when you have a system created by the university educated, and the university educated have a tendency and they have a vested interest in making it seem like they are the smartest, bestest, and the prime ones to do everything in society. So the system is created by them and leans in towards them, and then they keep doing that until they reach the point where they recognize, wait now, somebody needs to fix the toilets. And if none of us know how to do it, well, you're going to pay that plumber a hefty amount of money. Unless all of a sudden the government comes in and wants to subsidize it, which I wouldn't be surprised for. Experience is the best qualification. My degree is sitting in a container. It was never supposed to be, but I never even go back that results. All right. That's all I have for now for the YouTube and Instagram lives. I appreciate you all for being here. I hope you are educated, informed, or entertained. And I will see you next week, Monday. That would be my next live. Next week, Monday, between the half-hour period of 9 to 9:30. I will see you then. Peace.